Fable of the Mermaid and the Drunks. Fable of the Mermaid and the Drunks. I was drinking gin when she came in. She was naked. It was close to closing time, and outside it was raining. They began to spit at her, all the drunks in town. She came from the river. She didn't know her way around. She was a mermaid who had lost her way. Putting cigarettes out on her breasts, they harassed her, pouring beer in her hair and falling off their chairs full of laughter. A stranger to tears, she wouldn't cry. A stranger to words, she couldn't tell us why she was a mermaid who had lost her way. Her eyes were the color of a lover I can't remember. Eventually she left by the same door that she entered. I imagine she jumped in the river and was clean, swimming without looking back, swimming without a dream. She was a mermaid who had lost her way. This is another Pablo Neruda poem that I interpreted. And yeah, it's really good. I'm pretty sure all the images are there that he put in. I changed the rhymes, of course, from Spanish to English. Yeah, so you look at, I think it went like by stanza or something, you look at what he said and you try to say the same thing, but you put it in your language. And also the tone. What is he trying to say here? Fable of the Mermaid and the Drunks. I've always thought this was unappreciated beauty. Fable of the Mermaid and the Drunks. That I guess this goes back to like sensitivity in the artist. I was drinking gin when she came in, so you're the observer. So this is interesting. It's like, are you a participant? This is an interesting thing about society in general and what's going on. What is the morality of the narrator in this story? He was drinking gin when she came in. She was naked. It was close to closing time. Outside it was raining, so you sat in the setting, and, a special dramatic night. They began to spit at her, so immediately, and that's what poetry. If you think poetry is boring, you might not have the. It's not getting traction with you. So it's for whatever reason the vocabulary, and not just literally like understanding the words, but you're not getting the images, you're not getting the references. But poetry should be anything but boring. It should have economy. That's why all cultures have had a poetic tradition. All cultures that I've looked into, because it's meaning captured in the essence. Like it's meaning boiled down to its essence. So you shouldn't have excess in poetry. Everything should have meaning. And that's what I said about that one. B.F. Fairchild is the name of the poet. B.F. Fairchild. I bought his book of poetry. He's a published poet. He taught at Cal State San Bernardino. And I asked him, how do you read so well? And he was like, I don't read as good as he does. I try though. I want to get better. And you do that by understanding that each of the words have meaning. I was drinking gin when she came in. She was naked. It was close to closing time. I mean, sometimes there's filler. Sometimes you're trying to put a gap in between this clause and this clause, or this image and that image. But even that should convey something. It's when you watch a movie and it's a tight movie, it's because everything added to the story, the plot. If you read a book about plotting, a book about dramatic writing, everything should further character. You should have the exposition of character in every bit of dialogue. The reason why you hear a lot of cars behind me is because my folks live on a very busy street. That is one of the characteristics of poverty. Not poverty. It's more modest. This is a modest house on a modest street, which means that there's a lot of loud traffic right by. We are definitely not tucked away in the hills somewhere. We are on a loud intersection. Well, it used to be a highway, actually. This used to be a highway back in the day until we had bigger freeways built. All of California was, Southern California at least, was made to accommodate cars because of the auto industry, right? We had a lot of good public transportation in Los Angeles before the tire companies and the car companies decided to let us tear that up and let us think of this as we allow tech companies to get such a strong prominence in our economy. We haven't really corrected the predatory systems of our economy or our government, and so won't those same patterns be reflected in the future? The auto industry had such a strong sway in our economy that it dictated the scale and pattern of our urban growth, and now we're stuck with congestion. And it would be great if we had that public transportation that we could be building upon for the last 3 generations. But we didn't. They had us tear it out, and now we're committed to automobiles. So now when they talk about autonomous driving vehicles, or even with Facebook, with Google, with the apps, that's what this is in a way. This is an experiment in accumulating data, media. These are videos, but I also have PDFs, I have images, I have documents, I have these videos, I have links, we have audio, we have songs, and then how do we communicate it, how do we collect it all, turn it into a narrative that then I can rely on as a part of my identity? How do I turn it into a functional journal which helps remind me who I am and remind me of the story that I'm telling myself? Because that's the human aspect of it. Now there's a profit motive, but as we've seen, profit motives sometimes go against the human. And in the urban development of Southern California, we see how the profit motive kind of what made what we have here. What you hear in the background, these cars and everything, is because the way that these suburban sprawls have been laid out is to accommodate cars so we can sell more cars and more tires. And that's just documented fact. We're probably going to replicate those patterns unless we start reining in our economy for more human values. And that just seems common sense. Back to the poem. Fable of Mermaid and Dreams. What is this guy's morality? This is a Pablo Neruda poem. What is Pablo trying to tell us? In my words. She began to spit at her. All the drunks of town came from the river, didn't know her way around. Mermaid who had lost her way. So is this innocence? What happens is like you can kind of be a little judgmental and say this is just the artist saying that no one gets him. His art is the mermaid who lost her way. And when you criticize my art, you're like the guy who's spitting at the mermaid. But it's not just spitting. It's like there's some actual violence in here. And that's why I like the poem. Is this imagery was in the poem. I just put the different words in English. But putting their cigarettes out on her breast, they harassed her. They're taking cigarettes and they're putting them out on her breast, causing scars. They're taking a lit cigarette and putting it out on her skin. Pouring beer in her hair, falling off their chairs full of laughter. And this muses at them so much that they fall off their chairs. That they're enjoying the literal torture of this miracle, a mermaid. And that's the contrast, that's the punch in the gut. Is that this mermaid, who, no fault of her own, she lost her way. So she's not instigating at all. And if she lost her way, you would think that we would reach out to help those who need help. But instead, we laugh, we ridicule, we literally torture, and then for our own amusement, that which your human instincts should want to protect and comfort. We find this a lot in politics, right? I was just reading some notes this morning. I added another document to this list of my notes from the Iraq War, stuff that I haven't read in years just because it's too painful. And I didn't even serve over there, but just like the contrast between all those stories and all those books I read compared to what's actually in the news narrative, and when you read about Abu Ghraib and everything that happened, it's too much. It's like I don't have the bandwidth to deal with this right now. I'm going to deal with it in a video, but it's one of the reasons why I'm doing these videos. I'm unpacking strong emotions of my past to take an audit of what's gone into the development of my personality. Because this stuff, even if it's not in your conscious, it's in your subconscious. The stuff that you do affects you. And what we're starting to realize more and more in psychology is that stuff becomes a part of your operating system. You're just not at the top level, but it's at the bottom level. If you're taking an audit of my personality and my formative development, where did I get my ideas? I've always thought that if you want to criticize someone, you have to be able to put yourself in their shoes. And if I'm going to go after other people and their ideas and where they got their ideas from, and actually not just the conscious level, but actually ask them to question their assumptions and things that they might not be conscious of, I better do the same for myself first. I'm setting an example of honest intellectual inquiry into your own personality and the development of your ideas. Where did Obama, Barack, where did Trump, Donald, where did these people, not only what they believe, but if I think that their beliefs might be mistaken, and it might not even be their fault that they're mistaken, and it's bad input, then where did they get these ideas from? Obviously, Trump, a lot of his silly ideas came from his silly family. A lot of our ideas come from our family. And one of the reasons I changed my name is that actual break from my family and their tradition so I could start creating my own identity in an extreme sense without judgment, and I told my folks, it's nothing personal, but I gotta cover this bias. And if I want to do the things that I'm trying to do in life, it's a possible bias to be of this tribe, so I have to step out a little bit while not totally neglecting you guys. Which is why I come back and we spend time with each other, and you make sure that you invest in those bonds. So yeah, we do this in life a lot. I saw this recently. I was going on these, there's a caravan coming up from Honduras, and those people were, I guess, economic refugees is what they're claiming, and then some people on the supposed left, if you want to use that term, but the Democrats, what would be called the Democrats, the progressives. See, if you don't use those terms, what terms are you going to use? But, we'll say for now, like the liberals, the progressives, we'll use their terms until we come up with new ones. Say that they want to help them seek asylum, and then the right, the Republicans, the conservatives, what you want to say, are being ginned up by Trump, that there's like some ISIS in there, there's some bad people, and then 100 of them got kidnapped by human traffickers. Mexico just said that possibly 100 have been taken. And then I went, because I just was wondering, what would the Donald think of this? And I went to that forum on Reddit, and I saw some human values where they're like, oh man, this is terrible, or these guys play big boy games, or play stupid games, win stupid prizes. But those were the light ones. And then the mean comments were doing the jobs Americans won't do. I couldn't give a shit about these people. Good for them. And that reminds me of this poem. That's that part of human nature, where you see something, Mermaid who had lost her way. What's the difference between that and an economic refugee? Someone seeking asylum. Obviously the mermaid is out. That's why it is a mermaid in this poem. A mermaid came from the river, didn't know her way around. A mermaid out of water is someone who needs asylum, someone who is out of their element. So this is a stand-in for something or someone who is out of their element, and the first instinct is to harass her and torture her and be amused by her. So I guess what he's doing is he's putting on spotlight that part of human nature which demonizes and victimizes the other for our own amusement, which is really a something about vulnerability. And so it's something hardwired into us, that our better nature, our spirituality and our moral traditions and our moral stories that we tell ourselves, like this poem, are supposed to help us overcome. And that's why it's bad to have political leaders like Trump who really want to dial down to the lowest common denominator. That's his biggest danger, and that's what everyone's acknowledged, is that for his own personal interest, he wants to dial us down to our more animalistic states. How do you deal with a person like that? I have my own opinions. And I do not think that he's being dealt with properly right now. He was a mermaid who had lost her way. Her eyes were the color of a lover I can't remember. So now this is, having observed that, you're not of that group, that tribe who likes to demonize the other. You're the observer. Now you're the bystander. They call it the bystander effect. Someone's being harassed on the street. You're the bystander. Someone's being bullied. Are you supposed to step in or are you not? I've spoken before about how maybe kids, when they bully each other, maybe they're testing each other for pack hierarchy, and is that bad? Should we allow them to establish their hierarchies as long as it's within the confines of no one's going to hurt each other? If you read Roald Dahl, his short stories were amazing short stories. Not so much literary. If you want for technique and stuff, you have some really great authors who are technical writers. But Roald Dahl, his is more children's writing, a little bit more simple. But his short stories are a little bit more complex, and they deal with complex things, adult themes definitely. And he lost a child when she was young, and that definitely I think put some strong emotions in himself. That when he speaks about childhood, I think it comes from a very sincere, very strongly felt place. And he has a story about kids who bullied each other a little bit too far, about that kid who they bullied a kid, put him on the train tracks, tied him to the train tracks. The train ran over him, but he ducked under it. And they keep just torturing him more and more and more until finally climbs a tree to try to get away from him. Now they're shooting him with like a BB gun or maybe a real rifle. And one of the shots hits him. And then he jumps off the tree and he flies home. And so it's like he's saved by a miracle, where the way that Roald Dahl writes, and that's why writing's so amazing, because with a little bit of sleight of hand with language, you can ask the reader to put their imagination in the place of reality and sort of like bridge the gap between suspension of belief and like literal, and create the story with you. And so the way that the Roald Dahl writes it is the kid, did he fall? Did he not fall? Somehow he ends up home and crumples on his porch, and you're led to believe that he might have jumped and flown. Yeah, so there is that bystander effect. How much can you let kids be kids, and how much should you intervene? I remember not personally being picked on myself to that extreme, but being around, there's this one kid, we were young, and he was being picked on, and we weren't stepping in, but we felt like we should. And then an older kid stepped in and actually challenged the bully, and the bully wanted to fight the older kid, but like the older kid was bigger than him, and it's probably better for the bully that he didn't actually do it. But the rest of us were like, I want to, but I don't really want a part of that. And that's what happens too. So like, this guy's like, didn't do anything for this mermaid who had lost her way. Her eyes were the color of a lover I can't remember. I think that's an allusion to like, so this isn't literally about bullying. Like I talk about the other because right now that's heavy in society, about these social outcasts and the revenge that they're taking on us in the form of shootings. We had one about this disaffected kid who was a part of the involuntary celibacy group online, people who claim that it's not their fault they're not getting laid, and then he took out his sexual frustration by shooting up a yoga studio. That was just recently. This is November 2018. So that's heavy on my mind, I think, but I might be reading too much into it, because when he talks about the eyes are the color of a lover I can't remember, it's like, I think the author is more feeling guilt for his loves and his lack of appreciation for beauty. And the mermaid now isn't just the other that all of society rejects, but it might be the love that we don't appreciate. And it might not even be a person, but it might be romance and beauty in general. And he can't remember. It's like, I feel like the author, the narrator, wishes he did remember. And I feel like that's as much of an admission of guilt you're going to get out of this guy for observing this whole scene. Eventually she left by the same door that she entered. He imagines she jumped in the river and was clean, swimming without looking back, swimming without a dream. So that's also what I like about this, is that the mermaid's untouched. It's like you think she was harassed, you think she was burnt, but beauty has a resilience, and innocence has a resilience in this poem that I like. She was a mermaid who lost her way. Like, love is going to be love, and like the artist is going to be the artist whether you appreciate it or not. And it seems like she was harassed a lot in this poem, and it seems like she, yeah, I think this is more about just something not being appreciated, being a little bit harassed, a little bit tormented, but then it's their loss. Like, I identify with the mermaid more than the people in the tavern, and I think that it's just more of a reflection of them than her. But then swimming without a dream is kind of innocent, or kind of interesting too. She swims without looking back, swims without a dream. It's like that. I'm pretty sure that's from the poem as well. All of this should be very true to the actual poem. I didn't change up the tone at all, I don't think. This is what I like about poetry. That's why my original path, I was going to do creative writing, I was going to do poetry. I stuck on poetry because I still felt like I should do business. This is at a time when I thought I was going to be a lawyer. And so I thought I'll do the art stuff and I'll keep making art, but I'm going to go make some money. I knew at one point I needed to make money in life, and I wasn't sure if the art would do it. Eventually I did the real estate, and now I'm going to do the publishing. I'm going to marry the two, my love of art and writing, with what I've learned about growing a business, but and systems. But back then I thought at one point I was going to be a lawyer, and that's how I was going to make some money, and that's how I was going to get involved in a business sense in our society. And then when we would interpret poems in class, it was really interesting because we would, I was like the only guy. I was like, or the like one of two guys out of this class of like 10, 15 girls, and we would, yeah, it felt a lot like law. And when I started reading more about pre-law majors, they said poetry is or literature in general is a good pre-law major because you're interpreting text, and that's what I'm doing right here. It's a nice thing. If you could interpret the poem a certain way and you have a case for it, then who's to say that's not true? We're not reaching too much. I mean, I wrote these, so I, more than anyone else, I think, would have a case for being able to interpret these poems. And then, like, nowadays with like modern criticism, from what I've read, it's like the author doesn't even have a right. It's like the text is removed from the author, so you guys can read into this whatever you want, which goes into maybe what we know of the subconscious. But I'm trying to make a strong case for being able to pick apart my own work as well. It sounds nice, and at the very least, this poem sounds nice, and it has a nice flow to it.